everyone. This is Luke Lawal here with another episode, our sixth episode of President's Corner. I'm the CEO and founder of HBCU Buzz, and during this series, we interview and just have conversations with HBCU presidents to get insights on what's going on their campus, and just so that we can meet new faces of our HBCU community. Here today, we're going to interview our president of Wilberforce College, Elfred Pinkard. And are you there?
I'm here.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So tell me, awesome. Tell me a little bit about you. How did you get to where you are, and tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I am proudly the 22nd president of Wilberforce University, as you've noted. I've been here in this role since February of 2018. I came here originally as the provost and executive vice president. And of course, my predecessor got another opportunity and moved on, and the board named me. This has been an incredible journey. This is an incredible institution that we'll get some opportunity to talk about today. I have been an academician and administrator at HBCUs for the bulk of my professional career. I'm from Miami, Florida. I went to school at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia, was a psychology major there, went on and got a master's at Howard University, worked a couple of years and then returned to a school and got a doctorate from Harvard University, and began my career in higher education. I've worked at a number of different kinds of higher educational institutions. I've worked at private liberal arts institutions, large comprehensive institutions, but my passion has been HBCUs. And at the time that I came to Wilberforce, in fact, I had worked at 6 other HBCUs prior. So this really prepared me for understanding what the challenges are and also what the opportunities are, and to really be a part of this incredible legacy and be a part of leading this institution with the help of others into the 21st century is an absolute joy and a gift. And I have said and will continue to say that I believe that I have been placed here for a purpose, and it's that purpose-driven work that gets me up every morning to face the challenges. So very excited to be at Wilberforce and have felt that I've had a career that has prepared me for this place at this time.
Awesome. So it's safe to say that Wilberforce is your favorite.
Wilberforce absolutely is. Again, I went to Morehouse College, Howard University. I've worked at Spelman. I've worked at Dillard University. I've worked at Paul Quinn University. I've worked at Tougaloo College in Mississippi. All are wonderful institutions with incredible institutional sagas. But Wilberforce, as our students are oftentimes excited to say, we started this as the first private HBCU owned and operated by people of African descent, and just the incredible history and legacy of this institution is it's just seductive. At least for me, it is. And we're very proud of who we are as an institution, and proud that we are resilient and able to face challenges as we have in our 165 years of existence. Absolutely.
Wow. We're gonna talk all about your university, but for now, I wanna do this segment we call Buzzbreaker, and I just kind of want to ask you certain questions just so our community can get a little bit more information about you.
Absolutely.
And we'll start with this. What's your favorite book? What are you reading?
Right now, I'm reading a book called Our Kind of People. It's by an author by the name of Lawrence Graham, and it's the history of the African-American upper middle class. And I just think it's fascinating because we oftentimes think of the African-American community as impoverished or as monolithic. But to read the story of generations of Black folks that have in fact been very privileged and very wealthy, it's just very fascinating. Another book that I'm reading, and I normally read, think several pieces at a time, is the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave, which he wrote, in fact. And so that's just been a fascinating book. And then this is just a little quirk of mine, a little known fact about me is that I find the history of monarchies very, very interesting. And so right now, I'm also reading a book called Cousins Divided, the story of George V and Nicholas II. And the reason why this is such a fascinating book is George V was was the King of England, and Nicholas II was the Tsar of Russia, right at the time of the Russian Revolution. And in fact, if you know a little bit of history about Russia at that time, Nicholas II and his entire family was eventually assassinated. But George V was his first cousin, and they looked like twins. They looked like brothers. But because of the politics, his cousin could not have him come to England at this time, which would have saved his life. And it's just a fascinating story. And they were close. But how the overlay of politics and political intrigue, how it prevented a cousin from, in fact, inviting his other cousin and his cousin's family to England, which would have saved his life. And of course, we know that eventually Nicholas II, the Tsar, and his family and his wife and his 7 or 8 children were all slaughtered, well, assassinated by at the beginning of the Russian Revolution. So that's what I'm reading right now. So you see, if I'm all over the place in terms of my interests.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's so interesting. History has always been a learning piece for me. You know? Absolutely. My next question is about music. What do you listen to? What is your playlist?
So your audience is going to laugh. I know the young people are going to laugh at me, but that's okay. Everything that I listen is old school. Not that I don't like modern music, but so I'm listening. For example, one of my absolutely favorite songs, and it's a beautiful song, is a song called "With You, I'm Born Again" by Sarita and Billy Preston. Sarita was married to oh God, it'll come to me. But she had it's just a beautiful, beautiful duet. With You, I'm Born Again. Look it up, and I'm sure you'll fall in love with it as well. The other piece, another that I'm listening to all the time is a little known song by Whitney Houston called Dancing on the Smooth Edge. And in it, you really get a chance to see the magnificence of her voice. I'm also a big fan of Phyllis Hyman, and she did a song that's just a favorite of mine called First Time Together. Phyllis Hyman, and big Diana Ross fan, and she did a song called You Are the One, and it's such an incredible love song. There's a line in it that says, when you walked into the room, you were bringing me the sun and the moon. Can you imagine telling that to somebody, that you were bringing me the sun and the moon? So that's what I listen to a lot.
I was saying there's a poem that reminds me of that. Langston Hughes wrote a poem called To Our Tina. I don't know if you ever heard it. He wrote a letter to his wife before they met. And he told her, you know, he was going to give her the world and he was going to own her heart. And that's similar. It definitely reminds me of that.
Yeah. Sarita, by the way, it's beautiful, beautiful ideas that come from poetry and music. Sarita, by the way, was married to Stevie Wonder at one time. But yeah, she's passed away, as has Billy Preston. This is an old song from years ago. I mean, this is really old school. Your parents would know. Those young people who are listening, your parents would know this song. But I guarantee you all hear it, you would fall in love with it as well, because it's a beautiful, beautiful song. It's called With You, I'm Born Again. So. Yeah. That's
what about concerts?
My all-time favorite concert was a concert that years ago that I attended at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. And it was a concert from a Afro-Latina artist. Her name was Celia Cruz. Celia Cruz is no longer alive. She was Cuban. She was of African descent, but she had such energy. And I remember That was one of my favorite concerts. Celia Cruz, who has now passed away as well, at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles many years ago. That has to be my all-time favorite concert. Yeah.
I feel like every concert at the Hollywood Bowl is memorable.
Yeah,
I've been there probably like 10 times.
Yeah, absolutely. That space is just, it's just a beautiful space to have a musical experience. And I remember that night well. She had such energy. She was a great artist.
So I have a question for you. Dead
Yes.
or alive, anyone that you could have dinner with, who would you have dinner with and why?
It would be, without a doubt, W.E.B. Du Bois. He was just such a startling intellect. And of course, I think probably one of the great thinkers of the 20th century in America, and had such an incisive idea about what Black people should be doing and what was possible for Black people, and was just such an intellect. And so I just can't imagine sitting and having dinner with him and listening to the way he used the language and listening to his ideas. Just as an aside, he was also a professor here at Wilberforce. He came to Wilberforce right before he finished his doctorate at Harvard. So Wilberforce was his first academic appointment at the turn of the 19th century onto the 20th century. He was here at Wilberforce, but without a doubt, W.E.B. Du Bois. And of course, if I had my rathers, I would also include Booker T. Washington, just to sit back and listen to their dialectic, to their opposing views about what should happen with Black folks at that time. So but definitely W.E.B. Du Bois.
It's funny, anytime people ask me that question, I always say it's not one person.
Yeah.
I would love to create a round table. I would love
Absolutely.
to pull Martin Luther King and
Yes.
next to the room and
Absolutely.
Obama with Jay-Z in there and just like talk.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
just be like, just pick a topic and see how they feel. That's always my answer. Yeah. It's never
absolutely.
One person.
It's never one person.
But my next question for you is, if you could attend Wilberforce again, what 3 courses would you register for?
Definitely a course in history. I'm fascinated by history, and as a young undergraduate, it would have been fun. It would be fun next time around, if I had that opportunity, to really be introduced to the discipline of history. There's so many aspects of it, as mentioned to you earlier, that I have an interest in European history in terms of kings and queens, certainly African history, just history. The American history is fascinating. And of course, within history, there are subsets and subfields you can go into. So definitely history. We also offer mass communications here, and I'm fascinated by what you all do, mass communications. Of course, the old course was journalism, and that's still a very important course. And of course, English is important. I love English. I think English is a fascinating language and what we can do with it. And then the third course would be, you asked me about what was available at Wilberforce, and that would be sociology. I think I would want to take a sociology course. Although, and just as an aside, I've kind of been expanding on that a bit because this has always been an interest, and we don't offer it at Wilberforce, by the way. But if I had a chance to do it again, I would also study meteorology. I just think weather patterns and weather and it's just so fascinating to me. And I've always said if I could do it again, I would probably go to meteorology and become a meteorologist. I don't know so much if I'm interested in being a weatherman, but a meteorologist that would work at a major research center looking at climate patterns and that's just fascinating to me. So those would be the courses that I would pursue if I had the opportunity again.
I couldn't imagine. I know when people ask me that, I'd just be like, I don't want to go back to school. I was like, as long as I wasn't graded for it, I'll be okay. Like I would love to just sit and learn, but the pressures of college, and I don't want to do that again. But definitely wanted to the history of it all and just being able to re-educate myself on so many different subjects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely want to get into the history of Wilberforce and what it feels like to be on that campus. And can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. Wilberforce was founded in 1856, founded as a result of a collaboration or partnership between the African Methodist Episcopal, that's the AME Church. We have a deep-rooted connection to the AME Church, and the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, which was the white denomination. This was all going on in Cincinnati, Ohio, the southern part of Ohio. It's also important to recognize what was happening in the United States in 1856. Ohio was a popular route of the Underground Railroad. So this was an area of the country that had a very, very strong anti-slavery sentiment. This was also an area of the country where, and particularly where Wilberforce was actually founded, the area of Xenia, that had a significant population of people of color, people of African descent who had never been enslaved. We call them in history freed blacks. They were artisans, they were business persons, but they had never been enslaved. And so the idea that a university could exist was bold at the time. It was visionary. It was disruptive in many ways because remember now, most people of African descent were enslaved in the American South. But yet in Ohio, there was this conversation about this institution. And so Wilberforce came into being in 1856 and started as a university, had a classical education approach. And so while subsequent schools would take, as a part of the Du Boisian Washington model, one or the other, Wilberforce was very classical in its early education. What was being studied here was what was being studied at other colleges and universities around the world. So they took from that model. The early students of Wilberforce were the sons and daughters of the freed blacks, freed Africans, people of African descent in the area, and also the mixed race children of Southern plantation owners who supported their children and came to this area. They would come to this area to a place called Chihuahua Springs, which was a resort. And because Ohio was very forgiving in terms of racial matters, Southern plantation could bring their mixed race children to this area without any sanctioning, without any repercussions because of the political attitudes of the area. And so Wilberforce thrived for many, many years from 1856 on. However, at the beginning of the Civil War, because of the free people of African descent in the area could not support the war effort and the school, and the Southern plantation owners could not support their children and also the Southern war effort, the university closed. It closed in January of 1863. And the ministers of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, led by Daniel Payne, went to the owners of the mortgage and said, we want to buy this we want to assume the mortgage so that we can reopen Wilberforce. At the time, the owners of the mortgage were in negotiations with the state of Ohio that wanted to create an asylum. But they went with, and again, you see God's work in all of this, and we live this every day at Wilberforce. They agreed to sell the mortgage to the AME Church, and Daniel Payne assumed that mortgage, and Wilberforce University was reopened in June of 1863 with Daniel Payne as its first Black president. He also happened at that time to be the first Black man to be the president of a college or university in the United States, period. And so that's another distinction. And so from that point on, the university has existed for 165 years. I make the point that Wilberforce is the only of the three institutions that make a claim of being the first HBCU. The other two are Cheyney and Lincoln. We don't fight about that. Let me quickly say this is not a battle. But what I say to people is it's important to understand the historical fact. Cheyney University began in 1837. That's the year that they used to make the claim that they're the first HBCU. But they started as the Institute for Colored Youth in 1837. and did not become Cheney University until the turn of the century. Lincoln University in 1854, which is when they used the date that they used to make their claim as the first HBCU, begun in 1854 as Ashmun Institute and did not become Lincoln University until 1865. Wilberforce University was founded as Wilberforce University in 1856. We were not something else and became Wilberforce University. We were Wilberforce in 1856. So of the three, Wilberforce is the first HBCU, the first university to take that name, to take the name of university in 1856, and has maintained that same name through 2021 for 165 years. So that is the historical accuracy. We don't fight about it. We don't fight about it. We say we are the first HBCU founded and operated by people of African descent, first private, and the others make the claim that they do, and they have every right to make that claim. But I always feel it is important, again, in the spirit of brotherly connection with, this is not a competition, but I do think that it is important to be historically accurate. And so that's the record, the historical record.
And you know what's funny to me? A lot of times people debate that a lot, right? And you know, the title of having the first is very, very important. And for me, there's so many other subjects that you guys are the first. Like when you mentioned to me about having the first actual Black president of university,
Right.
Like that's huge. I had no clue about that.
Absolutely.
I could imagine even other HBCUs around the country when you really just make a list outside of, you know, the normal bureaucracies of like who's the first HBCU or who's the first, you know, the normal things we make a list of. There's so many different accomplishments, and
that's right.
You know, that's something that we at HBCU Buzz need to do a better job of publicizing, of like the individual first from every different, you know, HBCU.
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about the culture of Wilberforce? I know we're talking about the history, but tell me about from a modern day time point and this standpoint, what is the atmosphere like at Wilberforce?
Well, I do believe, and we make the point of this, I do believe that it is important to connect history and legacy. And so that's something that I do often whenever I have an opportunity to speak with new students and current students. I remind them of that history because I do think that it's important for them to have the connection between the founders of the institution and what they faced and what they put forth in order to make this possible so that they can continue to take up the mantle. And so when we speak of culture, there is a culture of affirmation and a culture of believing and understanding the resilience and the magnificence of our founders. Look at what people that looked like you were capable of doing through the incredible odds that face them, and that you are the inheritors of that today, and that you have a responsibility to move that forward. So as a part of the culture, there's that sense of affirmation, that sense of pride, which I think is very, very important. That sense of a can-do spirit, that we can do this because we have demonstrated that. A sense of being a part of excellence. And so that's why it's important for us to lift up those individuals that have come through Wilberforce and how they have laid a foundation and made a name for themselves and their connection to Wilberforce. We also have a history of social justice. And so we encourage our students to be active thought leaders and critical thinkers about what's happening in the world as it impacts their community and as it impacts them as young people of African descent in the world. And then there is a feeling of a family. Our students will oftentimes talk about the close-knit sense of, there's a sense of affirmation that everyone is affirmed and cared about at the institution. Now, of course, it's a challenge to maintain that as an institutional value, because people have their ways of behaving. But we have outlined kindness and civility as important to the Wilberforce culture, and as important to the way that we treat one another, the way that we affirm one another, the way that we celebrate one another. And we also say to students that Wilberforce is a place of possibility. This is a place because we are a possible people. Look at what we've been able to do for 400 years in this nation, with all that we have been faced with, and the fact that we are here today thriving in so many ways. And so that's, again, a part of the culture. And we also wish to establish a culture of excellence. Do you do well because it is a part of your inheritance. It's a part of who you are, to do well, and we're here. In fact, one of the things I say to our students all the time is our faculty and staff and administrators, we come every day and give you our best so that you can become your best. That's a part of our commitment to you. And so all of that then, in my mind, leads to the development of a culture that is nurturing, that is proud, that challenges students to be all that they can be, because they have others for whom they are responsible in addition to themselves.
That's amazing. When I think about the rich legacy and history of Wilberforce University, it's so hard to have this conversation and not just soak it all in. I'm trying. And then when everything you're saying about the current culture of the university is just amazing. Let's talk about the future a little bit.
Sure.
Tell
Absolutely.
me where you're taking Wilberforce into the future and what that looks like.
Okay. Well, this is a community effort. I work in tandem with the board of trustees, and then of course I have a leadership team. They all have teams, and so it's important that while I am the ambassador for Wilberforce, I'm the chief cheerleader for Wilberforce. We all do this collectively. We have a strategic plan. It's called Wilberforce 2025, Return to Prominence. And we're very interested in being cutting edge. We have identified our value proposition as our intent to become a premier liberal arts institution with a college to career and entrepreneurial focus for students with high potential. And it's important to be able to really sort of unpack that value proposition, because essentially what it says is this: we're interested in providing our students with the foundation of the liberal arts so that they can be liberally educated, not liberally educated in the sense of a particular political view, but expansive in their education, expansive in their knowledge base. I think that is important, that students understand a little bit about philosophy, a little bit about religions, a little bit about history, sociology, English. That is sciences. That's what liberal education means. And it's important that we give them that foundation so that they come away very different than when they came to Wilberforce. But we're also interested in making sure that our students are able to walk out of Wilberforce with a career, that they can get a job. And so that's this college to career intention, so that if they're interested in going to graduate and professional schools, they have a liberal arts foundation in order to do that. But if they're not, if Wilberforce is the end of their collegiate experience, they are equipped to go out and get a job to do that. And then finally, many of our students come to us and they say, we want to start our own business. And so we have said, we've heard that enough to say, let's then focus on developing an entrepreneurial mindset here at Wilberforce so that we can introduce students to what it means to be a successful entrepreneur. And so we are creating the next generation of entrepreneurs as well. And so that's the Wilberforce of the future. We have programs that we're very excited about. We have, for example, a master's program in clinical rehabilitation counseling. That program is training culturally sensitive clinicians to go out and work with opioid addicted individuals who have historically been marginalized and had no place to go for treatment. That's a big deal in this area. And so we feel that we are filling a niche in terms of our master's program. Little known that Wilberforce has a master's program. We also have a cooperative education program. It's been around since 1964. In fact, Wilberforce was one of the first HBCUs to have a co-op program. And very simply, the co-op allows for students to work, have practical experience at the same time they're completing their education. Many of our alums will talk about how effective that program was to introduce them to their current careers and to their paths to success. We have reimagined that program. It is now called the Cooperative Education and Experiential Learning Program, but we feel that that's a program of the future. We also have an adult degree completion program. Every futurist that looks at higher education, particularly in a post-COVID environment, is saying that the traditionally aged student, that is the 18 to 21 age student, is a population that we're going to see begin to diminish, and that colleges and universities are going to have to be very thoughtful in looking at other populations. And the adult learner, the degree, the undegreed, or the degree completion, those who are interested in completing the degree, the adult learner, certificate programs, getting people an opportunity to retool, that's the future. We have a program. It's been around since 1991. It's in its 30th year. And so we're reimagining that program as we look to provide services and connect to what the world needs. COVID has been a horrific experience for everyone, without a doubt, but it has also given us an opportunity to do important navel gazing and real introspection and real thinking, planning, and action about what Wilberforce will look like in a post-COVID environment. It doesn't help that a lot of prognosticators are saying schools like Wilberforce, they won't survive. That emboldens us because we are going to be around, and we're very excited about the path forward that we have outlined for Wilberforce.
And I hear that argument so much. I hear people talk about how HBCUs are not diverse. People have conversations about whether HBCUs are still relevant. And, when we talk about our legacy, I know when people ask me, are HBCUs still relevant? My first answer is, well, where would we be without HBCUs?
Absolutely.
Let's just run down the list. Let's start there and see if we were even fortunate enough to even ask that question, if it wasn't for some of these institutions. But I kind of wrestle with that with the new generation, with the Gen Z generation. Yeah. So I want you to kind of own into that 16-year-old that's kind of trying to figure it out, that has all the questions and is looking to come to Wilberforce University. What do you tell him or her?
Let me say this to you, Luke, and thank you for giving me this opportunity, because when people come to me, and now when they come to you, hopefully you'll appreciate reorient the question when they talk about the relevance of HBCUs, reorient the question in this way and say to them, the American higher educational system is very diverse. It is a mosaic. It is the most unique of its kind in the nation. We have women's colleges. We have Catholic colleges. We have community colleges. We have liberal arts colleges. We have Hispanic serving institutions. We have tribal colleges. We have historically Black colleges. We have Jewish colleges. If HBCUs are irrelevant, then I would ask, are those other institutions irrelevant as well? HBCUs are a particular part of the segment of American higher education. HBCUs are not for every Black student. HBCUs are open to every student. HBCUs have existed because of a particular time in the history of this nation where higher education was not available to people of African descent. These institutions were, in fact, created. The outcomes and the quality and the work of HBCUs are on full view in the form of the vice president of this nation and others. And so we see what these institutions have done and can do. What I would say to a prospective student, if they were interested in Wilberforce, let me tell you what Wilberforce can do for you. If this is compatible with your desires to grow as an individual, then we're here to help you. If it is not, then there are many other institutions that may be for you. Wilberforce is not for everyone. And I think that it is important that there is a real synergy between an individual's individual mission and their own vocation and the mission of Wilberforce. And so that's what I would say. So I don't get into those discussions about the relevance of HBCUs any longer. I simply say, if HBCUs are no longer relevant, then Wellesley is no longer relevant. Yeshiva is no longer relevant. Catholic College, Catholic University, or Georgetown is no longer irrelevant because all of those began as special mission institutions, just as HBCUs. It's part of the mosaic of the American higher educational system. And that's part of the beauty that we have many places for many students. The student can find their way. And for many, many students, HBCUs is the place that they find themselves and they can be nurtured and nourished and fulfilled at these institutions.
I now have another ace in the hole, because changing that question to figuring out like where we would be is one direction, but now I'm going to start explaining all the different options that were started because of the need for higher education.
Yeah.
So,
but I do like the where would we be question. I mean, I do like that response as well. That's important. Where would we be for it not for HBCUs? Where would we be? That's an important question. So don't keep that in front of people, because that is an important question. And the response to that is a clear affirmation for why HBCUs need to exist in 2021. Yeah, so keep that, but use the other as a part of your arsenal.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what's crazy? When I was thinking about the new generation coming in, I was thinking about the need for entrepreneurship, like you mentioned, about business. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your entrepreneurship and innovation program, because you know I'm a entrepreneur, and this is something close to my heart. So can you tell me a little bit about the program? What you guys doing at Wilberforce?
We have the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. It was created in 2016. It's funded. The initial funds came from our board chair, Mark Wilson, and his wife. So it's the Mark and Shelley Wilson Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. It supports our academic program. So we have a minor in entrepreneurship, and we're moving to a major in entrepreneurship. And we do a number of things in that center. This year, we've had, for the last couple of years, we have an entrepreneur in residence, where we identify an entrepreneur who has hands-on, who's at the university within reason, given their schedules, meet with students, work on projects with students. This year, a gentleman by the name of Greg Harbut is our entrepreneur in residence. And we're so excited because he and his family he's a third or fourth generation thoroughbred breeder. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's what they do. But they are on the business side of horse racing. Very few African Americans there, but he will be at the disposal. He will place his talents, his experience at our students' disposal in this role as entrepreneur in residence. We have taken our students on during the summer pre-COVID to Atlanta to meet with entrepreneurs there to see how businesses run. We give our students exposure, again, as I mentioned, to entrepreneurs. And the program is still evolving. I mean, we're only limited by our imagination in terms of what's possible there. But yeah, that's that program. And again, it supports the academic program. So it's a standalone center. And we are now looking at some additional funding that may allow us to create an entrepreneurial hub within the surrounding area that will be connected to the university. But it's really a part of, we intend to make entrepreneurship one of our centers of excellence here at the university. We want Wilberforce to be known as a place for entrepreneur development. If a student is interested in becoming an entrepreneur, we want them to think of Wilberforce University.
Perfect. I'm going to take you up on that. You know, I never say that I want to stop educating myself. So that's definitely important for me.
See, for example, Luke, you would be a prime candidate for an entrepreneur in residence program here at Wilberforce. You are a young man. You're a young African American man. You've started your own business. And so you would work with our students in terms of talking about what was it like from the beginning that you had this idea? What have been some of the challenges? How have you funded that? That's the kind of back and forth that we find that is very rich, and that our students can relate to people who are actually doing it. And that's the idea of the Entrepreneurship in Residence program. Absolutely.
That's just so I can count on one hand how much access I had to that when I was in college. Yeah. That changed the trajectory of my whole entire career. Yeah. The people I knew that are actually in business doing things and actually giving me real feedback and examples and testimonies of things that they did and what worked and didn't work was such important for my career and success. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I know we're going to switch gears a little bit. I kind of want to touch COVID and the vaccine coming up. And just, can you tell me a little bit about Wilberforce plans for the vaccine and how you guys handled during this entire pandemic?
Yeah, well, fortunately, we're almost a year into this pandemic. So we had some lessons learned from other institutions in terms of how we should proceed. What we pivoted, as many institutions did, to a completely online teaching and learning experiences last March, when it was clear to us that something very ominous was happening with regard to this pandemic. And so we remained virtual for the remainder of this last spring semester, and then all fall. This past fall, we remained virtual as well. So our students were being taught, and teaching and learning occurred completely virtual. In order to support that, we had to make sure that students had devices. We got hotspots to students. We were able to, because of some funding from the CARES Act which supported schools, we were able to refund some of the fees that our students had paid that they would not be would not be able to take advantage of because they were not on campus. And we did some training for our faculty. Faculty needed to pivot as well. Many faculty had never taught in a virtual environment. One of the things I do say, however, and I was very clear to say this to students and said it often, was while it was very difficult, and I don't want to diminish the difficulty of having students move from a face-to-face instruction to a virtual environment. Remember now, young people are very fluid in the virtual environment. And I had to remind students, you have your devices, you're on your phones all the time. You engage your community on your phones and social media. All of that is the virtual environment. And so we wanted to give students some agency in terms of this so they didn't feel so foreign to them. This semester, we have come back and we are doing hybrid. So this is the first time that we have welcomed students back to campus since last March, almost a year. But we allowed students who wanted to remain virtual to do that, and students who wanted to come back. And so we brought students back to campus. We followed all the protocols, protocols that were set out by CDC, World Health Organization, the health departments in terms of distancing, masking. Students needed to be tested and are tested regularly before they even got into the residence halls. We operate the university on Monday through Thursday. And then on Friday, we clean and sanitize, and that's part of our protocol. And so we have these protocols that we have instituted. And again, we have been helped by the fact that other institutions, we're all in this together. And so we've learned that lessons learned to apply to us. Now, with regard to the vaccine, we've not done anything. We've not had there's been no messaging around taking the vaccine from the university's leadership. And that's been intentional. because people feel so very strongly about vaccines and vaccine programs. And it would be irresponsible, I feel, at least I feel, other presidents may feel differently, for us to be not prohibitive, but be prescriptive in terms of what people should do with regard to vaccines. I took the vaccine a couple of weeks ago at the invitation of my colleague, president of Central State University. He was taking the vaccine, he and his board chair, he offered it to me. I said yes. It was purposeful that we did that. It was a photo op because we wanted to communicate to our various campus communities that taking the vaccine was safe. And so I communicated that by my taking the vaccine very publicly. And then we were given a number of slots to that vaccines were available. And we made those available to our faculty and staff, and many of them took advantage of that. But in terms of messaging, should you take it, should you not, we've not done anything, and that's been intentional. And I don't think that I will. People will need to make that decision for themselves. We have not made, and I don't think we will, I certainly have not made having the vaccine a requirement for employment at Wilberforce. And I don't know if that's being done other places, but I don't think that we would want to move in that direction. So we say to, and my communicating to the campus community often, we say, in order to keep us safe, we must all be responsible for our behavior. We know what keeps us safe. Let's employ those safety protocols. Let's regard each other. This is a community. Let's behave as though it's a community, and let's see if we can keep this virus at bay. We have a dashboard where we put up on our website all of the cases of positivity, so that anybody can see where we are. We have an isolation house that we've identified for individuals that are positive and need to be isolated. And so we have in place all of the protocols that we hope will keep that should keep our community safe if people follow those protocols. That's always important. And again, we say to our young people, particularly our students, you have to follow the safety protocols. You have to wear a mask. You have to socially distance. You can't hang out. And we see evidence of this all around the country, and these ideas of super spreaders and young people, particularly, not just young people, but people not adhering to what we know is good science in terms of keeping this virus from spreading. So that's kind of where we are in terms of that.
Yeah, I believe that our good work and keeping everyone responsible and safe will put us, maybe we could be doing this interview in person. Yes. Come to Wilberforce campus to kind of get a real sense of it all. I know we're getting ready to finish, and I just have one more question for you.
Sure. Yes.
And this is probably the most important with these interviews, just because I'm more focused on the future. I'm more focused on what's next. And oftentimes when people look back, like you said, we have to study our history. And sure. I just want to make sure that your legacy and what you want to be known for is always outlined. So I want you to take a second and give me or anyone watching, our fans, our viewers, to let them know what you want to be remembered for and what your legacy is all about.
I want to be remembered for assuring that Wilberforce was a financially stable university with a positive and uplifting narrative in the public sphere. That we were intentional and strategic in terms of outlining a path forward. And so that we will be the legacy of a strong liberal arts institution, special mission institution, an HBCU, with a strong entrepreneurship program, a strong master's program, a strong adult degree completion program, robust enrollment, a school that attracts investment from prospective donors, a school that has no accreditation issues. And so I was brought here, I think, by God, and I believe that's within the depths of my spirit, to stabilize, which was an institution that had had a number of challenges in the most recent years. So, I mean, Wilberforce, we have had challenges. I mean, it would be disingenuous of me to say that we have not. And we still have challenges, but we're a much stronger institution today than what we were a year ago, let's say. And so I want that to be my legacy. When people write about the Pinkard years, I want them to say that those were the years of stability. Those were the years that Wilberforce came back to its former prominence. Those were the years that we began to be the Wilberforce that our founders intended us to be, and that we were for many, many years before we fell onto these challenges. That's what I want to be my legacy.
Beautiful. I mean, that's beautiful. I can't wait to share this with our community. Can't wait to publicize this. I just want to thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us on our President's Corner. And
thank you.
I really appreciate you.